Good evening, everybody. I'll be talking about the experimentation of modernity and modernism within the era of Amman architectural modernity. My intention is to shed light on certain experiments or examples that might clarify some of the ideas regarding modernity and its relationship with the city itself, Amman. And the more important thing that I wanted to define is the two concepts of modernity and modernism. To me, modernity is the software, while modernism is the hardware. Modernity is the program or the social, cultural, political, even technical projects that were started in the maybe the end of 18th century and during the 19th century. It's not only the modern architecture as we know it during the 20th century. And modernism is the manifestation of that program into a physical form, and architecture is one part of that. So I'm talking about this idea of relationship between the ones that concerning the programming and the ones that concerning the physical form. Amman architecture modern era, to me, this historical reference is starting at the turn of the 20th century, and it will end by the beginning of postmodernism in the 80s to us. So it's something between 1900 and 1980s, because even though postmodern started in the 60s and 70s, but in our part of the world, the real change happened in the 80s. So I will not talk about the current era with postmodernism, where we have all these changes on the concept of modernity even. Then I'll start with this question. Is modern heritage, why Amman? Why Amman? Amman against the centers of modernity. Amman, the marginalized, the poor, the intimidated, the reactionary or progressive, and the nomadic urban, and the new uncultured. To me, these were the conceptions of Amman between maybe the 40s and the 80s. Most of the conception about Amman was portrayed as such. We were marginalized and still maybe marginalized, and we feel poor against the other centers of modernity. And I think it's good that I'm presenting after Abu Dhabi, so we could see the difference between the two. We feel intimidated against the other centers like Beirut, Cairo, Casablanca, all these, and even Baghdad, with all this tradition of high modernity and great works of iconic modern architecture. And we were labeled as regressive or reactionary against the progressive ones. We were the الرجعية العربية against التقدمية and all these revolutionary regimes during the 50s and the 60s. And we were thought of as a nomadic urban. It's not an urban, and we are not civilized because we are not part of that continued history of urbanism within this place. And even we were labeled as not cultured, and sometimes that even I would go into the so-called you were the agents of the West. And all these things were part of our maybe part of our conception, even for ourselves and our city. And that's why I'm questioning whether in Amman do we have modernity or not, and do we have a modern architecture that worth exhibiting and talking about or not. Modern heritage, why Amman? Amman was coming back from the dead, as we were told. In most of the resources, even in the official resources of GAM or other places, they told us that Amman by the Ottoman period, nobody was there until 1878, and at that time it came back to life after a long frozen period. So the things that affected Amman at that time were the Ottomans during that period, where we have the two important actions that changed the status of Amman. The first one was the dislocation of Circassians and settling here in Amman and around Amman and Wadi Sir and other places. And then the Hijaz Railway, which was around the turn of the century, and that enabled Amman to be linked to other places and to be part of this new mode of change according to this new mobility. With that, as mentioned with Dr. Rami, that mobility was part of this modernization era. Then we have the other events that affected Amman, Arab Revolt and Amir Abdullah, who came to Jordan and settled in Amman. And then the new state or nation with the Transjordan Emirate and the British Mandate. And all these were part of the history of the region, and particularly part of the history that shaped Amman. Of course, talking about the mandate for the British mandate, as you all know that this is a quote from Dr. Ali Mahafza in his book تاريخ الأردن المعاصر. قرر مؤتمر الصلح في باريس مدى وصاية عصبة الأمم على الشعوب المتخلفة وتضمن قيام ميثاق العصبة الذي وقع في فرساي 1919 نظام الانتداب. The more important thing is that we were labeled at that time that we are retarded or we are not capable of ruling ourselves and we cannot build our own countries because others should help us in doing that. So as a result of this Arab revolt and the negotiations between the British and Emir Abdullah, we got into the point where they have decided to initiate a national government in Transjordan, even though before that there were more than 4 different governments in different places within Jordan, and Ajloon and Karak and other and Salt and other places where each one was also monitored by the British after the World War I. So we have the إقامة حكومة وطنية في شرقي الأردن برئاسة أمير عبد الله. تكون هذه الحكومة مستقلة استقلالا إداريا تاما، تساعد بريطانيا ماديا توطيد الأمن and the other things. Of course, one of the interesting things that were put in that agreement is تنشئ بريطانيا قاعدتين للطيران في عمان وزيزيا الجيزة. So the British were aware of our geographical and other informations to know the places for the airports. The first one in Marka and the second one in Zizia, even before we started any thing in that. So they were part of their understanding of the geographical location was how to reinterpret that location for their interest. This is a photo from 1921 with the arrival of Amir Abdullah to Amman, where he has his camp in Marka, and we could notice the aeroplane by which Herbert Samuel is coming to this place to exert his authorities and to enable this new creation of the state nation. And this is another photo that clarifies this event, where the proclamation of Amir Abdullah in Transjordan in April 1921, and the other events that followed. And in these, I just want to mention this great contrast between the locals and the British, and even between the locals and the government. You could see there on the right of Amir Abdullah is the Prime Minister, Rashid Atla, and then John Whiting. After that agreement in 1921, there was this appointment of the new cabinet of ministers, and within that there was only one Jordanian, while there were 4 Syrians, 2 Hijazi, and 1 Palestinian. So why I'm referring to these things? I think in interpreting all these events, I'm promoting the idea that Amman as a capital, especially that it was selected in front of other places like Salt or even Ajloon or other places who were more populated than Amman and were more historically important and even strategically sometimes more important. But Amman was portrayed as the new program. So in my mind, Amman was the program of modernity within this place. So it's not only the physical work of establishing a capital, it was more of establishing a new society and a new type of state nation where we were part of the Levant or Bilad al-Sham, and after the World War I, there was this decision of splitting Bilad al-Sham between the French mandate and the British mandate. Of course, the British mandate took Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq, and then we were part of this British mandate, and we were formulated as such. Even though this does not mean that it was like the creation of the British, but I think it was like an intersection of different parties together. It was part of the this big program of the Nahda and the Arab Revolt, where it was that one was having this vision of a more pan-Arab type of state that could encompass the Levant with the Hijaz even and the Iraq. That whole area was part of this dream. But at the end of the day, what has happened as a reality is that we ended up being the only part that could have fulfilled this dream. So we have these two maybe intersecting visions of making way for modernity in two different ways, because the British conception of modernity regarding the socio-economical, cultural, and even architectural was totally different than the ones we're talking about regarding the Arab Revolt and the new rulers in Jordan. And that's why later on there were lots of conflicts between the two, especially that Jordan and Amman in particular was the center for the coming leaders of revolts in Syria after the French occupation driven them out. So there was this dynamism of social, political scene at Amman at the early stages of formulating this place as a capital. Then the other factors that played part in formulating Amman as a program for modernity also were geographical location. Where we have this location between the fertile land of mountainous and Jordan Valley and the desert. We are at the edge of that, and even Amman is having both. It has this spot of mountainous fertile land, and it has the other part, which is now the East Amman, the poorers and the unfortunate ones with the desert and with all the unfortunate things, even in terms of geography. The demographical reasons. Amman was portrayed at that time that as a place of tabula rasa, as a place with no precedent of people who are residing in here. And this was told to us as part of the narrative of creating Amman, that after all these long histories of the place that it was deserted, and then suddenly it came back with no original people, and all of us are coming to Amman as part of creating this new society where we could share all the new values within that. I'm not saying that this is my conviction or my idea of Amman, but I'm trying to portray what was there within that narrative and how this narrative is part of the my understanding of Amman being the program of modernity. So it's not as any other capital where we have a modern architectural works or a modern programs, sub-programs, but we have a larger program of creating this as Amman. So it was this new society of pluralism, inclusion, and neutrality, where we have the urban living, which is part of modernity. So we are creating this new urban living where the settlement of everybody can be achieved within this place. And not only in the 20s, but even with other later events were in 1948 and 1967 and 1975 even, and 1990. We were the place where everybody is coming in. Now we started with the Circassians and the Shishani and the Armenians, and then we have the Syrians, all the traders, and then even at that time we were having everybody here with the Palestinians and the mix of all these people coming in, and especially as an attraction point for other people from around Amman, like from Salt, from Ajloon, from the Bedouin from the desert. All these were part of this continuing building Amman as a center, and later on the Palestinian refugees in 48 and then in 67, and the Lebanese in 1975, the expatriates in 1990, and the Iraqis, and then after that in 2003 the Iraqis, now the Syrians. So Amman was always this type of mixture of accepting all these people here within this urban setup. So as a result of that, of course, in the 1920s, Amman was not fully conceived as a city, but it was having these small settlements within the main areas, and there were three main spots that were characterizing Amman. The first one was in Marka, where we have the Hijazi railway station, and in future of that, we were having the airport, and that one was like a suburb of Amman, while in the center of Amman, we were having the Roman relics of the amphitheater and the citadel. This is one center. The other center was the Al-Masjid al-Husseini, Al-Husseini Mosque, as part of that. I just want to go back to this geographical location. I have an interpretation of for that as we are in between the urban type of settlements within and the edges of the more the desert Bedouin type of living. So we were at the edge between the two. Not only from the geographical point of view, but also from other points of view where we have the in between the Gulf areas and the Levant or Bilad al-Sham as north and south and east and west and all these other concepts of in between that affected us in Amman. These were the main places that governs Amman and shaped the new place as part of its urban development, where we have the Sail or Sail Amman, the main valley running from west to east, and then we have the other branch with two valleys, one branch getting into two valleys where we have Wadi Sakra and Al Abdali, and later on one of them is characterized by going to Damascus, and the other one going to Wadi Sir. So we have King Hussein Street and Amir Mohammed Street, while the linking two is the place for King Faisal Square. In front of that, we have the Masjid al-Husseini as the center for Amman. This is how Amman was photographed during the 20s and 30s, where we have the amphitheater and the linearity of the new buildings along the Sail or the Wadi of Amman. And we could see how Amman was growing naturally in response to the topography, mainly more than any other factor. And this topography was dictating the way we link the different places together. And this one is showing how we get from the valley into the top of the mountains or the small hills around the center of the city. So even though Amman was considered as a program for modernity, it did not have that type of modernized city planning, and that did not start until maybe the 50s and the 60s. So it was more led to develop and grow naturally according to the forces of the geography and topography, and according to the socio-cultural, economical factors that govern this type of development. And even though we have most of the buildings were built after 1930s and 1940s, but these buildings were part of the continuation of the traditional architecture of Bilad al-Sham, and we were what we have, and trying to experiment with developing our own way of dealing with the site itself. And this is how Amman was developed over time, keeping with the basic principles of the centers. The one between the dialogue between the amphitheater and the citadel. The other is the center of the downtown, where we have Al-Husseini Mosque, and then the King Faisal Square. The other developments were more expanding over the mountainous area, and in a way going west for the affluent and rich people, and going east for the people who cannot afford it. This shows parts of Amman in the 50s, where we have the new developments along the different mountains, especially like Jabal Wavdi and Jabal Amman, and Jabal Amman al-Jadid as a modern Jabal Amman, or the new Jabal Amman. And with these, we see that we have two patterns of movement within that, one within the valleys, the other on top of the mountains. How much time do I have? Okay, I'll go fast regarding this. This is the first center of Amman, where we have the Al-Husseini Mosque, which was rebuilt after the earthquake in the 1928. And this is our main urban center, which was also developed with Amman as it goes, like here in the 60s and in 2000s, and then even this center with the congregational mosque, or the main mosque, was moved during the 80s into this new King Abdullah I mosque in Al Abdali, with the modernist type of architecture. And later on, even after this was overshadowed by other places, it moved out into the King Hussein Mosque and Al-Husseini Park in 2000s, with a third type of mosque. The other more important urban place for Amman at that time was King Faisal Square, and the relationship between the two is also indicative of this modernity, because we were having as if we are having this type of functional zoning, where we have one for the spiritual center, and the other one for an urban life, the third one for archaeology, where we have the amphitheater and the citadel, with all the celebrations and the representing the power and the state here, with different events within that place at that time during the 40s and 50s, and other events that were more attracting people into the center. And even during the 60s and the 70s, this was also developed into a more attraction of greenery, fountains, sculptures, with this development of an urban type of space. Of course, overwhelmed by the traffic and the congestion of cars, so it was remodeled many times. So Amman architecture modern era was this experimentation of rebuilding a city from scratch, while in other places I have selected 3 examples for experimenting with modernity and on a smaller scale or sub programs. The 3 ones were University of Jordan, the sports city, and the medical city. These 3 were also having this importance of socio-cultural and even scientific programming and idea of modernity, even over architecture. It was not like an architectural statement, but it was a modernity statement of social cultural type. The first one is University of Jordan, established in 1962. The 3 major projects were established in the 60s. This one was more of the educational, social progress and inclusion, where we have this platform for not only for education, but for social interaction between the different people from different levels, from different places, because this was the only available higher education. And this was attracting people from Aqaba, from Ma'an, from Karak, from Erbil, from all places around Jordan into this place. And even in some cases, it was also attracting students from the Gulf area at that time when it was started. And this was part of this interaction and this advancement of the modernity program, let's say, as a sociocultural and scientific program rather than just geometrical, architectural manifestation. Even though we could notice that one of the more important buildings during that time, at the beginning of that, is the university library, which was modeled into a modern type of abstract, straightforward, rectilinear, horizontal type of architecture that were all the modernity type of stylistic figures. The one important thing that shows this intention of the University of Jordan as a program, not only as a place of architectural and education, is the importance of it, where we have all the main events of the university were attended by the King Hussein, Prime Minister, and other ministers, and even with the all the graduation commencement until maybe the beginning of the 80s, were part of this ceremony yearly developed. The university setup was also laid out according to the idea of zoning, where we have the central zone having the academic buildings, and even the academic buildings were split into scientific buildings and the humanities. The humanities on our left, where we have the orange layouts, and the other ones with the green were the scientific buildings. The ones at the far end with the brown with the medical schools. The other part adjacent to the street, the main street linking Amman to Suwaleh, we were having other services and facilities for the students and for this interaction with the society, with the two main poles at the ends. On our far right, we have the hospital, the university hospital, and our far left we have the university mosque. And these two poles were also marking the starting and ending of the university itself, as if it's a way of presenting its location within the city. I'll just go quickly with the different buildings to show that at that time during the 60s, more and more these buildings were presenting this type of modern architecture in a modest way. We're not talking about a very lavish high iconic buildings, but at least they have all the elements that could be identified as modern. This is Faculty of Arts, which was the first one. And then we have the more important buildings of Faculty of Sciences, where we have the different sciences with different buildings. So one for biology, one for physics, one for chemistry, and one for geology. So this was also in going with the main idea of this functional zoning. And this shows how within the space itself there was this type of a mixture of social strata within that. These are the chemistry, and then even with the economics, the Islamic studies also was built according to the modern style, let's say. So at that time, it was not like the Islamic should have an Islamic style with all the arches and domes added to it. This is one of the dormitories at that time, and then the School of Medicine was connected to the hospital. This is the hospital with the School of Medicine and School of Nursery. And at the later stages, we have other buildings. Then we have a Museum of Archaeology, one of my favorite buildings there in the University of Jordan. This shows the complexity of the buildings over time, where we have added lots of buildings, but we already forget about the initial zoning of the central area, the buffer zone with the street, and the back area for more quiet type of development. At that far end, we have the hospital, while at the other end here we have the mosque, where even the mosque itself in the end of 70s and beginning of 80s was also designed as a mix of so-called Islamic with the a new type of modernity in that. Unfortunately, the more important one, which is the University Hospital, which was built in the 70s to mark the beginning of the university, was developing over time into more and more buildings were added to it, so that the whole idea of this mark went into this agglomeration of different buildings into this connection. And of course, with the postmodern era and the 1990s and the 2000s, we went into different types of architectural styles added to this place without any respect to its originality. Just to show the entry point where the gate, this main gate was also an iconic part of the image of the university or this institution and its relation to the outer world. And this was also painted and remodeled in different ways to fit with the postmodernism style. The other one is Al Husseini Sports City. Al Hussein Sports City also was a project for the development of the youth and a place for social interaction. So it was like a concept of a city or where we have this complex of sports activities at the same time as a park open for the whole people. So it was not like only a city for the athletes and the sports. In fact, it was part of it, which is an important part of it, was the Palace of Culture, where we have this combination of social and cultural events in addition to the sports events. How it looks from outside. This is the main gate. And then the stadium with 25,000 spectators at that time. They have all the important matches and the other events within this stadium. And the greenery of the place against this huge urbanization of the site around it, make it special and more open as against this development. Even this project also in terms of architectural work made certain contributions to the advancement of the structural and construction types, where these buildings were designed from consultants outside Jordan, and even the contractors were foreigners. So this is part of this interaction and the transfer of knowledge into the locals with the aid of this type of projects. This is the Palace of Culture, where all the cultural events were going on here. Even until recently, our graduation ceremonies for JJU were held there. And this also contributed to this idea of advancement of engineering and construction with its expressionist of architectural modernity. Later on, they have built another one for a more official and different type of events. The Royal Cultural Center, not far from that one, also. The third one in 1968, the public health services, with also this concept of different buildings that serves for different purposes of medical services and research center. And this was part of the military service for people, but it was open also for everybody. with this type of architecture that makes the upper one shows the beginning type of courtyard, grid intersections of long corridors intersecting with each other with double loaded type of functional requirements that were part of the modern understanding of this type of functional buildings, and then the other one for the Heart Institute.
May I ask if you are already at the end of the presentation, because I think the audience would like to ask one or two questions.
No.
Is it finished?
Yeah, I'll only take 5 minutes to go.
You had already nearly an hour.
Yeah, okay.
You had 15 minutes so far, so I suggest maybe we could have a look at the questions from the audience, because there will probably be one or two that you would like to answer and refer to what would have been shown on the screen. Okay, so I'm looking at the audience. Who would like to ask something about this very informative and interesting presentation that we have seen so far?
The other type of things.
I suggested that he may refer in his answers to what would be shown in the next slides.
I'll go just for the record. What I do have over the other side of the story is the type of modernism that has this idea of architectural or physical intervention over the programming intervention. Three selected buildings: the Parliament building, the Housing Bank building, and the Al Burj building in Amman. This is the Parliament. Started with this type of a small building, and then in the 50s moved into this one, which is more considered as something between the modern and the traditional. And then by the 80s, we have had this nice building of modernity that has some kind of iconic type of presentation for it. But with this one, sadly enough, we have another building that was annexed later on to be part of the Parliament, which was the Ministry of Public Works at that time. And then you could look at the gate with the this pitched roof and ceramics and all these things. Again, it's the original one, and how we already worked in between. We're not totally modernist, and we're not against it, and we're trying to manipulate our way between. The other one is this building of sculptural qualities, and at the same time part of this brutal type of architecture, which was considered at that time when it was built in the early 80s as the iconic building of Amman, and it was ported everywhere, even at the official news of the Jordan TV, and in some of the national songs, everybody was trying to portray this as Amman, and people were connecting this with the mountainous type of configuration or composition. And this was a new type of building, new type of structure, a new scale for Amman that changed everything. Of course, the construction was built by a Korean company, which was building these buildings also. The last one is Al Burj building, with also another type of expressionist exploring and experimenting with the idea of modern architecture. I think experimenting is the natural process, continuing all the time. That's what humans do. That's why our more important architectural works in Amman were experimentations, not a definite type of iconic buildings. Modernity was not embraced fully, but was there all the time as a subconscious agenda, and we have our own version of it. So when we came into the postmodernism era, most of us have jumped into this new boat and tried to follow that. And later on nowadays, everybody was reconsidering this. Heritage of modernity is not only physical artifacts, but the programs and intangible narratives of the processes were part of it. And selecting heritage examples, the target is not only listing, but for learning and changing attitudes towards all these examples and experimentations. And modernity and modernism are interchangeable, interconnected, and dynamics of the built environment. And thank you.
So thank you very much for this very informative presentation, and especially for summing up here at the last slide. So I'm looking to the audience. I think we should have time for one or two short questions or comments maybe. So I'm looking around who would like to ask something about that. Yeah.
I have a small direct question about Saqf al-Sail, because I never knew that there was a Saqf al-Sail, a river almost going beneath the city until recently, maybe 10, 15 years. I know about it. So is there any idea of reviving some of it, pointing it, I don't know, part of it, exposing it, something like that? Because really missing a big thing.
Saqf al-Sail a project was also viewed at that time as modernist, as the progress of coming into a more clean and hygienic type of environment. So we have to close it and we have to move on into a more efficient center for the city itself. I don't know of any projects for that thing, but in the end of 1990s, when we were designing the a new municipality for Amman and Ras Al Ain. At that time, there was a sort of closed proposals or competitions for that one, for that place, and I was contributing to that competition with another my friend, architect Bilal Hamad, and in that proposal, we were proposing to regreen the whole valley of Amman, but that was a type of, let's say, dreamy projects that could not be utilized practically.
I just have one comment. I find it very interesting how you position Amman as a project of modernity. I think this is extremely interesting. As I was growing up, I was always confronted with this question of, where are you from? And I would say Amman, and then this is never a very satisfactory answer. And the beginnings have to be somewhere else rather than from Amman. And I found myself always in a position, even after studying architecture, where I have to actually defend the city, more or less, and to grant it voice. And I think your intake in positioning, even though we talk about the same thing, but within your positioning of Amman as a project of modernity, as a conscious project of modernity, I think it's extremely interesting. But I would like to add one thing, which is in the remaining part of your presentation, you concentrated on the official part of the making of this project. And I want to emphasize the role of the average Ammani, the average citizen, who's not presented here in your presentation, and the contribution to this project of modernity from the positioning of the average Ammani citizen, the teacher, the multi-mixity, the urban mixity, the tolerance, the education, the teachers in schools, and so on and so forth. Because I think that, yes, it could have been a conscious project of modernity, but it's also a project of modernity from below by the citizens themselves that made the specificity of what Amman is.
Yeah, I agree, because the idea with Amman that it was not like the forcing power of the regime over the people, but it was this sharing and mixing of roles. But from my part, I thought that you and other presenters will present all these other stories of houses, cinemas, hospitals, and all this. You were talking about the this new strata of middle class and how the middle class was contributing to the program of Amman as modernity. So I wanted to just take another part of it and shed light on that.